Alright, what's up guys? My name is Zack, and today I am driving a 1990 GMC Safari SLE. Up front is a 4.3 liter V6, and down below is a 4-speed automatic transmission. Now, I am super excited to be driving this GMC Safari for two reasons. First of all, this is the earlier generation of the Safari. I've driven a later one several years ago, but this is an earlier one. I think it's in an awesome two-tone color, which I love, and I'm excited to share with you GM's kind of putting the kibosh on minivans back in the late 80s and early 90s. But the second reason is the fact that I just love GMs of this era. I think they're super charming, and I'm excited to share with you why that is. But if you'd like to submit your own vehicle and have it reviewed here on the channel, you can head on over to my website, zackpradel.com/submit. It's a quick and easy submission form. It takes under a minute to fill out, and I come out to you. And if you'd like to see all my videos weeks or sometimes months in advance, you can head on over to my Patreon for only $5 a month. But let's get back to that 4.3 liter V6 under the hood. Well, that is the 4300 series engine from GM, and it was the predecessor to the 4.3 liter Vortec. Obviously, they changed it a little bit. And here it makes about 150 horsepower. However, they later updated it for the early 90s. That gave it closer to 200. So it's not a speed demon. It's not anything particularly quick, but it did the job, and it was one of the biggest engines you could get in a van for a very long time, and most certainly of the era. Chrysler vans were still using either 3 liter or 3.5 liter V6s. This is the whopping 4.3. Like I said, paired to it is a 4-speed automatic. It is the 700R 4 transmission, so it's pre-4L60E, and it works, does the job. It kicks into overdrive very prematurely, but when cruising around town, I don't really mind too much. Last but not least about the drivetrain, this particular Safari is rear-wheel drive. However, you could have found them in all-wheel drive starting this model year of 1990. How does it feel to drive the GMC Safari? Well, you really do sit on top of things. You feel more like you're on the car than in the car, because you do have that big elevated seating position, but just everything is just higher up. Now, this is based off of the Chevy S10 platform, so it drives and handles and feels like a truck. It's basically just a ladder frame underneath. However, it's more like the S10 because it has S10 parts like that 4.3 liter and some more rough and tumble. The Chrysler minivan of the time, the Ford Windstar that I've driven, those were all a lot more friendly to drive. They were more car-like, where this is more truck-like. This was a heavier duty. Odds are if you had a bigger family, you more so opted for the Astros/Safari van as opposed to like the Windstar or Town & Country or Caravan or Plymouth Voyager. So you were kind of already in an industrial mindset. You were probably already buying industrial portions of food from Costco or whatever it was in the 90s. So you were used to a little bit more rough and tumble. Visibility is good, has thin A-pillars. Love that about late 80s and early 90s cars. So nice to see here. With that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have 5 gauges. Off to the left is my oil pressure and coolant temperature. Off to the right is the fuel and battery voltage. And then, of course, we have the speedometer in the center. I love this gauge cluster because it's trying to look digital, but it's not. Now, you could have optioned these with digital gauge clusters in this era, but they all went bad. And so now, over 35 years later, it's nicer to have the physical ones because they actually still work. On the steering wheel, no airbag, no anything. Off to the left, we have our headlight and parking light switches. We have a climate control vent and our brake release down below. And then moving on to the door, we do have our power windows and power locks. Very flat, again, very utilitarian. This car was a lot less inviting than a equivalent minivan, so you see that here. This feels very industrial here on the door. Even more industrial feeling is the buttons and switches in the center. So we do get our power mirrors, rear heater, interior lamps and fog lamps. And just to add to it, this is not a factory part, but the original owner was a pilot, so it actually has a pilot's compass up on the dash. I wonder if I could get my instrument rating just from driving this. Down below, we do have the Delco radio. This really reminds me of this era. This was plopped into every single GM vehicle at the time, all the way up to the Cadillacs, all the way down to the Chevys and Pontiacs. they got something like this, and it's nice to see. Off to the left of all that, you do get your climate controls. They are very vertical, very tactile, and I like them a lot. They're a little bit hidden out of sight because you're not really focusing on that area. Then we do have cup holders, so we'll do a big friggin' bottle test. It might have passed if there was enough vertical space for the big friggin' bottle. But remember, the big friggin' bottle test is a test of length, width, and height. And so, unfortunately, because the dashboard comes out so much, it actually fails the big friggin' bottle test. However, we do have some storage for our cassettes. We have more storage cubbies down below. And of course, we have our cigarette lighter and ash tray. We do get a wide open center area. You can actually walk from the front of the vehicle into the back. That's why a lot of people build these into camper vans. Great road trip vehicles. If you need to swap out your navigator, you could pull one of the kids up front, send grandma to the back, that sort of thing. And then of course we have the seats. The seats themselves are very comfortable and they do feel very independent. Because you have a lot more space up here and that flat door card, you could sit in this seat and not touch anything around you, which is really, really nice. This added a lot of comfort to vehicles like this, especially for road trips. So I quite like it. The seats themselves are very comfortable. GM seats of this era are incredibly comfortable. I would say the best in the industry. So that bleeds over here into the Safari SLE. However, speaking of seats, we do have 2 more rows of seating. So let's go do some more backseat reviews. All right, getting in on the passenger side, because this is the era where they only put big sliding doors on the passenger side. Now, a lot of this was for safety. You know, if you had a bunch of kids back here, they're excited to be at the amusement park, so they run out of the car. Well, they can only run out on the passenger side, which here in America is the curb side, and not into traffic. The other reason was for structural rigidity. They didn't really know how to put 2 big sliding doors on either side and still have it pass a rollover crash test. So that was some of the reasoning. Once we are back here, this is a really nice place to be. We have bench seating for both the second and the third row. This big window over here, you can actually pop open, gets a nice little breeze going on in there. Of course, we have ashtrays in the doors and some cubby space. We get some lights up here. Very nice to see that. It feels very airplane in here, and that's a big reason why the original owner was a pilot and he liked this car, because it kind of feels like a private jet a little bit. The bench seats are, of course, incredibly comfortable, super soft materials. I have my own heater back here, and the AC in this particular one does still work, and it runs off of an R12 system, which is a lot more efficient at cooling. However, we do have a third row, so let's hop back there. So the same story carries on back here. 3 seats here, 3 seats here, very comfortable seats. I have storage and cup holders on either side. It's an enjoyable place, and this does feel bigger than a lot of minivans of the era. So if you had a big family, you had to make that tough decision. Do you prioritize mom or dad driving, or do you prioritize space? If you prioritize space, this is what you got. Let's hop into the very back. We'll take a quick look at the trunk and cargo space, and then we'll talk about the looks. All right, around the back of the GMC Safari SLE, open the doors up like this. And then there's another latch here. These don't really want to stay open on their own anymore. That's why the owner actually included a little bit of Tupperware. Oh, nope. There you go, and a little brick here. There you go. Modern solutions to ancient problems. Once we are back here, no like crazy, rear cargo space. This was all about the family. This was all about people transportation. Of course, you can throw the luggage back here if needed. Wasn't always a given though. It still does have the factory jack. There you go. That is around the back of the GMC Safari from 1990. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and like I said, I love the two-tone of the Safari, and these wheels are absolutely delectable. They are so good looking. I wanna see these wheels on like a Firebird or Trans Am or something. I think they look really, really good. I personally prefer the more updated Astrovan / Safari. That's just what I grew up around more. These weren't around as much when I was a kid. However, it's still cool to see. I still love the color combo, and I think this is an incredibly unique automobile. With all of that being said, let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think driving the 1990 GMC Safari SLE. Well, this has been a very positive experience. I like this just because of the way it is. It's a 90s time capsule, and I love driving vehicles like this. I've always felt a kinship with this era of GMs. They're comfortable, they're plush, and there was just something about, GM was the home team, the heartbeat of America. That was their slogan of the time, and so I want to talk about their other slogan, which was for the GMC Safari, which said, "Life is too big for a minivan." This was considered just a van, not a minivan, and it had a lot of bonuses and attributes that made it nicer. It has the open walkway in the middle, like I mentioned. It has big comfy seats. It has a lot bigger of an engine offering. However, the trade-off is the fact that this does feel like an industrial van because it was shared with the Astrovan that had the cargo version. There were plumbers that drove these. There were electricians that drove these. A lot of blue-collar businesses owned vehicles like this, and so you still get some of those attributes while driving it. The suspension is rough. The buttons are unfriendly and unsculpted. They're here for a job, not to wow you. And so if you get out of this and into a Plymouth Voyager, Dodge Grand Caravan, that's gonna feel like the Ritz-Carlton compared to this. But some buyers just needed the space. They needed a car that was going to fit their entire family and the dog. And so this offered more. This was the answer to a big question. You bought a Caravan or a Voyager because you like to drive your family around. You bought this because you have to drive your family around. And even though the GMC Safari was the upgraded, nicer version, still not that nice. However, I have to say, it is incredibly cool, and it has been such a privilege to drive this vehicle. I love it. I love showing you guys vehicles like this. And that is all. Thank you to my friend Kyle for letting me borrow his 1990 GMC Safari. He's also letting me borrow his 1990 Suburban. We'll be doing a comparison video between the two, as well as they will get their own reviews. Kyle's absolutely awesome. He is a big 80s and 90s car aficionado, and I always like people like that. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.